the Sunday. It's very warm outside, nice weekend we had, and yet you all are here, sacrificing your time to take some association of the devotees. So thank you very kindly for joining us today. Um, Today, this month, actually starting February, is a month when we have a lot of festivals that we celebrate in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, especially within ISKCON family worldwide. Because every week, if you look at the calendar, there are multiple um, days of celebrations of appearance days or disappearance days of Vaishnava Acharyas. You would probably not find another month in the whole calendar year when you see so many appearance days of Vaishnava Acharyas. And tomorrow is one such appearance day of a very, very important Acharya in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, Srila Gopal Bhatt Goswami. So today we thought that we can discuss a little bit about him, as about his life, about his contributions to Lord Chaitanya's movement in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. So let's get started. We'll start with the Mangala Charan. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yudha Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatham Sahagana Raghunathan tam sajivam sadhuvaitam savadhutam parijana sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Triyubhascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripatam aham vande Shri Gurum Dina Dharanam. Hare Krishna. So, speaking about Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami, I'm in no way qualified to speak about him, his glories, his lifetime of service. Um, but yet, I'm going to make an attempt. If I say something that benefits you all, please don't consider that to be my contribution. It's a contribution of my Srila Gurudev and other senior devotees from whom I have heard in preparation to today's topic. And if I say something, my Srila Gurudev, if I say something wrong, please consider that as of my own shortcomings. So, with that being said, let's get started. So, as we know, there is so much literature out there. There is a treasure chest of books that the six Goswamis left us, and many of our previous acharyas have left us. And of course, what Srila Prabhupada has given us. There is so much to be learned. So in the year 1516, 1 year after Lord Chaitanya's visit to Vrindavan, Sri Rupa Goswami and Sri Sanatan Goswami arrived in Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya requested them, amongst many other things, to discover the lost places of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. Now we know that at that time, Vrindavan was a very much different than it is today. And that is not an exaggeration. Vrindavan was at the time of the Goswamis, in every sense of the word, a jungle, a forest. There are some pictures, even, going back 80 years, 60 years, even 40 years, 30 years that we see today that are circulating on social media. from Brindavan, and that gives us just a little bit of a small glimpse into what Brindavan used to look like. So, and as such, they wandered through Brindavan's many forests. They had to live very austerely. Typically, we hear that they lived under a different tree every night, but more detailed research shows that they would often take shelter in the hollow of a tree, a clearing in a thorny thicket, and sometimes they even lived in an underground cave. And there are caves like that. You go to Govardhan and you go to some other places, you will find caves. They are there in Vraj and around the areas. So actually, I was reading that Jiva Goswami, he came a little later, and he once resided in a vacant crocodile hole at Nandaghat on the Yamuna River. That's the life our acharyas lived. Can you imagine? We live in our homes, our apartments, and we have so many facilities, and we have books, and we yet don't take advantage of reading them. And these acharyas, they lived in such in such an austere manner, yet they contributed so much to our literature. So in all these austere settings, when Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis, they first came, they chanted the holy names. They wrote all these sublime books on the science of Krishna consciousness. I recently read that Srila Sanatan Goswami would sleep only 2 to 3 hours a day, and at night he would burn the dried leaves, and with that light he would write his books. Yes, he would burn those dried leaves, and with that light he would write his books. How precious is that, what they have given us, right? And we must take advantage to read and spend time reading these books. Now, of course, we can understand that whatever condition Rupa and Sanatan Goswami had to face, they were always blissful, because internally they were always present there in their spiritual forms as who they are: Rupa Manjari and Lavanga Manjari, yeah, the maid servants of Radha and Krishna, who had appeared as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and who had appeared during that time and had given, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had given them the service in Sri Vrindavan Dham. And they did that service so well. Srila Prabhupada said one time, Vrindavan is the gift of Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatan Goswami. They wrote so many books. So poor people could take advantage and become Krishna conscious. What does that mean to be poor people? Poor people means we, the people who are bereft of the richness of Krishna consciousness. And as I said, when they arrived later on a little bit, Srila Jiva Goswami arrived actually around 1535, 19 years after Rupa and Sanatan Goswami had come to Vraj. Srila Jiva Goswami came. And as he entered Vraj, he was greeted by Sanatan Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, Raghunath Bhatt Goswami, Gopal Bhatt Goswami, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Prabodhananda Saraswati, and Kashishwara Pandit. Can you imagine all of them there? Yeah, in one place. And soon afterwards, when Jiva Goswami took shelter of Srila Rupa Goswami, and he rendered so many menial services to him. He was begging alms or for Rupa Goswami. He was cooking for Rupa Goswami. He was washing Rupa Goswami's feet. He was helping to prepare all these manuscripts that Rupa Goswami is putting together. Uh, these are these are our great acharyas, but they also rendered menial service. That's a way to become dear to the heart of your well-wishers. So during this time, devotees inspired by six Goswamis were also writing books about Krishna consciousness in Vrindavan. There were other devotees there as well. Other people were writing, they were writing on like palm leaves, bark, even old deity dresses. Apparently, there were sadhus who already had deities. And when they were writing, they would write on old deity dresses and nothing else. But our Goswamis, however, they used handmade paper. Handmade paper, where did that come from? It was actually donated by the Rajput kings of Rajasthan, especially the gifts that were coming from Raja Jai Singh in Jaipur. And on this royal paper, you could say they penned books like Ujjwala Neelamani, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Gopal Champu, and others. Even today in Jaipur, you can actually purchase this handmade paper in certain areas. And so they contributed to so many other books like Sadhana Deepika and others. So it mentions that Sri Rupa Goswami had many skills. He could prepare deities, means like he could carve the deities. He could draw expertly. He was a master in astrology, mathematics. He was fluent in Sanskrit, Persian, Bengali, and so many other languages. And of course, he was also renowned Gaudiya Vaishnava philosopher, as we know. He was also very popular, very respected by other sampradayas. So it was in the year 1542 that Rupa Goswami utilized his talents to personally carve and install and offer a very, very beautiful deity, Damodar, which is another name for Krishna, to Jiva Goswami, his disciple. And there were so many other details. So, Rupa Goswami carved Damodar from a piece of black marble that was brought from Vindhya Parvats, mountains, which are in Madhya Pradesh in central India. So that deity is in Jaipur even today. He's like about 8 inches high. He's at the local Radha Damodar temple there. So if any of you ever go to Jaipur next time, please go take darshan of this very, very special deity. And he was put there, in the Radha Damodar temple, and before any large temples were built, and our Goswamis were worshipping their deities so simply, of course, with lot of devotion, because they were renunciates. They didn't have many facilities to worship the deities, but they were still doing it so nicely. Usually, they kept them under a tree in which they slept. You know, that night, like places to different places they were at. So every night, if they are taking a shelter and a rest under a different tree, so that's where the deities used to be. Actually, the historical record states that our Shri Radha Ramanji in Vrindavan, which is the self-manifested deity of Gopal Bhatt Goswami, was actually worshipped in a tree for many, many, many years before he got his temple. And in the area of the present Radharaman temple, there used to be a large lake. It was connected to the Yamuna River. And at night, Sri Radharaman's pujaris would put him in a boat anchored in the middle of the lake for the security and safety of the Sri Radharamanji deity. And there in that boat, there used to be guards with bows and arrows every night, trying, protecting the deity, safeguarding the deity. So he was being worshipped in a tree. Can you imagine? So anyway, so they had all these, and those arrows would be like dipped in a homemade poison. It is described that even if that arrow just nicked you, you could die. So it's said that those bows and arrows are still somewhere in the Radharaman temple. Of course, we haven't seen it, but this is the folk of Braj, that these things that locals know and they talk about. So during his presence in Vrindavan, Jiva Goswami was very, very active in making all these wonderful arrangements. He was a perfect, wonderful organizer. For example, in year 1558, Jiva Goswami purchased the land that we now know as Seva Kunj. Many of you actually have the paintings in your home, of Radha and Krishna. I've seen it at Gopal Chandra Prabhu's home. I have at my home, and I've seen it at Vaman Hari Prabhu's home. So this painting is actually titled Seva Kunj. We also call it Divine Couple, but actually the painting is originally called Seva Kunj. So Jiva Goswami purchased the land that we now know as Seva Kunj, and actually many of Radha and Krishna's loving pastimes took place in Seva Kunj 5,000 years ago. There are records in Vrindavan Research Institute. There are records in there about um, the place that Jiva Goswami purchased this land, and uh, I have personally not heard, but I've heard from my Guru Maharaj that he has personally seen those records. And this was an area. It is near Krishna Balram Mandir in Vrindavan, where it is said that Jiva Goswami purchased the area of Sevakunj for 30 rupees. 30 rupees back then, equivalent to 30 rupees, whatever it was. So it meant a lot in those days, 30 rupees. And he purchased it from Alikant Chaudhary, who was the Emperor Akbar's local landlord. Vrindavan had a local landlord, and his name was Alikant Chowdhury. The and in this, in Vrindavan Research Institute, it's this document is there. The original deed for that purchase is there, right? The original deed, original document, and it mentions on that deed that the tract of land that he bought included Sevakunj, Dangali, Imlital, Shringarsthali, Rasasthali, and the boundaries of the property that he purchased for 30 rupees are marked by 4 trees, one in each corner. And there is in one corner there is a tamarind tree, a other corner is a banyan tree, there is a peepal tree, and then there is a kadam tree. So those are the 4 corners. All these so wonderful nectarian details are there. Um, you know, so in his last days, Srila Rupa Goswami gave all his manuscripts to Jiva Goswami, and he requested him to write commentaries on them. And when Sri Rupa Goswami departed, Jiva Goswami placed his transcendental body in samadhi at the Radha Damodar temple. On that auspicious day, all the Goswamis there present were there. Like namely, it was Srila Raghunath Bhatt Goswami, Gopal Bhatt Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, and all the other prominent Vaishnavas that were in attendance. All of them proclaimed to Jiva Goswami that from this day on, you are our master and you are our leader, because he had those all leadership qualities. He was the youngest of the 6 Goswamis. He saw, yet everybody has so much confidence in him that, he had such a great vision. He saw Vrindavan perhaps like it is today, with thousands of temples and millions of pilgrims coming every year, and Vrindavan being glorified all over the world. He probably had that vision. He went on to be the most prolific of all the 6 Goswamis. He wrote volumes and volumes of transcendental literature. And my dear friends, when he finally passed away, he was also placed in samadhi at his dear Radha Damodar temple. So that's just a kind of a brief overview. As devotees within ISKCON, in a Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, we must make it a point to visit these samadhis of these great acharyas in Sri Vrindavan Dham. One may ask, what is a samadhi? Well, unlike common man, who at the time of their passing, at the time of their death, they're either buried or cremated, and short while later they're forgotten. Great devotees of the Lord, they are buried and they are remembered and they are worshipped. Their spiritualized bodies are lovingly placed in the sacred earth, and if possible, in Vrindavan Dham, near one of the Krishna temples or one of the Leela Sthalis. So Srila Prabhupada once said that if you cultivate spiritual knowledge in large quantities, then your body is no longer material. It becomes spiritualized internally, externally, everything. Chinmaya. Therefore, the body of the great Vaishnava Acharyas is not burnt. It's buried in samadhi because it's pure. So these samadhi mandirs act as a focal point for us as devotees of Lord Chaitanya to connect with the mercy and the blessings and the inspiration that continuously emanates from these realized souls in their samadhis. So by visiting these samadhis and offering obeisances and circumambulating them, offering prayers, offering articles of worship, we can receive the mercy of these great souls, because the liberated souls are beyond the limitations of time and space. They can reciprocate with their worshippers. Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually has written something in this connection. He says, the eternal associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can show themselves to us if they choose to do so. So there is that intimate connection to remembering our great saints and attaining eternal residence in Vrindavan. In his Gitavali, Bhaktivinoda Thakur also writes that you should all remember Srila Kavi Karnapurna and his family members, who are all sincere servants of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You should also remember the father of Kavi Karnapurna, Shivananda Sen. Always remember those Vaishnavas who strictly follow the path of Srila Rupa Goswami, who are absorbed in bhajan. And if you actually want to your residence in land of Braj, then you must remember all the Vaishnavas who are followers of Srila Rupa Goswami. So now, one such follower we could say, or compatriot of Srila Rupa Goswami that we would like to talk briefly, Um, Today is Srila Gopal Bhatt Goswami and his Ishtadev, Shri Shri Radha Ramanji. Um, there's a difficulty in describing the life of Srila Gopal Bhatt Goswami because there is not a lot of information about him, at least compared to Srila Rupa Goswami or Srila Sanatan Goswami. He's hardly mentioned anywhere in our Shastras. He's not mentioned in Chaitanya Bhagavat. He's not mentioned in Chaitanya Mangal. Which is two great works on the life and times of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Even in Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's only very, very little talked about Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Srila Kaviraj Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami only mentions him very briefly. He just writes that he's one of the 6 prominent Shiksha Gurus. But fortunately, Narahari Chakravarti Thakur, he gives a detailed account somewhat of Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami in his Bhakti Ratnakar. So, so the question may be raised or maybe asked as to why Gopal Bhatt Goswami is hidden from our view. Well, the most probable answer is that out of extreme humility, he didn't want to be mentioned. And think about it in our lives when we do something, even if it's a small thing, we have a desire in our heart that we be recognized, right? And other people talk about it, glorify us for our services or anything that we have done, you know. And if we don't get that recognition, we either feel discouraged or we feel that, hey, I'm not being valued. But look at the example of our Vaishnava acharyas. He and as we will learn during the course of next hour or so, he has contributed so much to our sampradaya, yet he did not want to be mentioned anywhere. So Vaishnavas are very humble by nature. So he had this extreme humility. In Srila Prabhupada's purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita in Adi Leela, um, Adi Leela, chapter 10, text 105, we hear that Srila Prabhupada writes that when Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami took permission from all the Vaishnavas before writing the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Gopal Bhatt Goswami also gave him his blessings, but he requested him not to mention his name in the book. So therefore, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has mentioned that Gopal Bhatt Goswami only very cautiously, he has mentioned him very, very cautiously in just 1 or 2 passages of Chaitanya Charitamrita. There is not a whole lot of a reference about him anywhere. Sri Kavi Karnapurna has revealed to us in his Gaura Ganodesha Deepika 184 that who Srila Gopal Bhatt Goswami is in the spiritual world. He writes, Ananga Manjari Yasit Sadhya Gopal Bhaktakaha Bhatt Goswami Nam Kechit Ahu Shri Guna Manjari. So she, who was formerly Ananga Manjari, has appeared to enrich Mahaprabhu's pastimes as Srila Gopal Bhatt Goswami. Some say that Gopal Bhatt Goswami is actually Guna Manjari also. So Gopal Bhatt, so there's both authorized, bona fide, explanations of what the role of Srila Gopal Bhatt Goswami was in Krishna Leela. So Gopal Bhatt Goswami was born in 1503 near Sri Rangam in South India as son of Venkata Bhatt. He was an aristocratic South Indian Brahmin from a Ramanuja Sampradaya. And in 1511, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, during his tour of South India, visited this holy dham of Sri Rangam. And it's described that when he went to the temple to take darshan of the deity of Sri Ranganath, beautiful, beautiful deity. Some of you might have been there. I have not yet. I would love to one day go there. So, this deity is extraordinarily beautiful. You've seen the pictures. Long deity of Ranganath. So Mahaprabhu, when he got there, he started chanting and dancing. It's described that during the kirtan, Mahaprabhu roared like a lion. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is often referred to as Hari, right? The word Hari can be taken to mean a number of things, but one meaning is lion. For example, Narsimhadev, he's called Narahari. I was listening to a class by our dear Amarendra Prabhu, and he was explaining this little concept of, he's called Narahari, half man, half lion. But why is Mahaprabhu sometimes referred to as Hari, as a lion, right? Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati explains in Chaitanya Chandramrita that Lord Chaitanya has a golden complexion like a lion. Of course, golden complexion also comes from Srimati Radharani, but it's like a lion also has a similar golden complexion. So his hair is down to his shoulders like that, like the mane of the lion. He has a broad chest and a thin waist like a lion. He appeared in a Simha Rashi, or the Leo constellation, and like a lion, he would enter a cave and roar, and that would send the resident elephants running from the cave for their lives. So it looks like, sometimes Lord Chaitanya would live in the caves also in his tour of South India, and he would go in and roar, and elephants would leave, and then he would occupy the cave. So similarly, our acharyas say that we may invite the lion of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in our hearts, where he will roar Haribol, Haribol, and send that elephant like anarthas, like lust, anger, and greed, running away from our hearts. Haribol. So then the Lord will occupy the cave of our hearts forever. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. So Gopal Bhatt Goswami was born as a son of Venkata Bhatt, who was a Brahmana resident of Sri Rangam. He was initiated in Sri Sampradaya. The city of Sri Rangam is located on the Kaveri River in the district of Tanjore. It's about 10 miles west of Kumbhakonam. And regarding this temple, actually, Srila Prabhupada has said that Sri Rangam temple is one of the largest in India. There are 7 walls surrounding it. There are 7 roads leading to Sri Rangam. And the ancient names of these roads are Dharma, Raj Mahendra, Kulashekara, Alinadan, Tiruvikram, Tirubidi, and Adyavela. I might be messing up a little bit of the pronunciations, but those are the names. And the temple was founded before the reign of Dharma Varma, who reigned before Raj Mahendra. So there is many celebrated kings that have reigned in this area, like Kulashekara and others also that resided in the temple of Sri Rangam. Yamunacharya, Ramanuja, Sudarshanacharya, and others also supervised this temple. So Venkata Bhatt was a Vaishnava Brahmana, and he was an inhabitant. He lived in the Rangashetra, and he belonged in the disciplic succession of Sri Ramanujacharya. And Sri Rangam is one of the places of pilgrimage in the province called Tamiladesh. And his brother, who his brother was? His brother was Shripad Prabodhananda Saraswati. So the son of Venkata Bhatta, was later known in the Gaudiya Sampradaya as Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who established our dear temple of Shri Radha Raman in Vrindavan. And Sri Ranganath's huge and very expansive temple is so tall that it's described back in the day. Acharyas write that it seemed that as if it would reach the heavens. That's the huge 7 walls that I was describing earlier a little bit around the temple. And then millions of devotees would come to see the deity of Ranganath every year. And within that temple, the Brahmanas were constantly chanting the glories of Ranganath. So when Gauranga Mahaprabhu entered that temple and he began chanting Hare Krishna in Kirtan, his chanting was so sweet that all it seemed like millions of Gandharvas were singing together. And everybody was stunned and astonished, and the hairs of their body stood on their end. His divine figure was wonderful to behold, and his bodily radiance was dazzling. So from his lotus eyes showered the torrents of tears of Krishna Prema. The Brahmanas there, they were looking at this sight, and they couldn't understand what is going on. They were wondering, is he God?
Is such a manifestation of ecstasy even possible in a man? So again and again, exhorting everyone to, chant the holy name, saying, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Gorang Mahaprabhu was like bringing everybody along with him. He was drowning in the tears that poured from his lotus eyes. And he would fall in front of the deity like a tree that has been just cut. He would just fall flat. So everyone thought that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared like this golden form of a mountain that had fallen to the earth. And Venkata Bhatt, he was observing this. He was detecting that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, has those symptoms of a Mahapurush, a great personage. He could not contain himself as he saw Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu performing this kirtan. His heart was filled with joy. It was filled with bhakti, Krishna prema. So pushing his way through the crowd, he joined the kirtan party and lost himself dancing and chanting and singing the holy names of Hari with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu regained his external consciousness somewhat, after this chanting and kirtan was over, um, Venkata Bhatt fell in the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord, and he asked for his mercy. He said, please, give me Krishna prema. The Lord said, Krishna, Krishna, and he embraced Venkata Bhatt. So at that time, Sri Venkata Bhatt invited Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to stay with him in his home during the 4 months of the rainy season, which is Chaturmas. At this and at his home, Venkata Bhatt, when Mahaprabhu agreed, so they came, and Venkata Bhatt washed the Lord's lotus feet, and he also, gave the Charnamrit after washing to the entire family, including his 10-year-old son Gopal Bhatt Goswami. Now it's described in Bhakti Ratnakar that when Gopal Bhatt drank this Charnamrit of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, um, lotus feet, Gopal Bhatt started weeping and crying. And and it's, one obvious reason is because, well, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes in the mood of Shrimati Radharani, right? And so Shri Krishna, it's mentioned, right? Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nahi Anga. So Mahaprabhu is a combination of Radha and Krishna. So Radha is there. That's one obvious reason. He's in the mood of Radharani, and Gopal Bhatt Goswami is Ananga Manjari, who is Radharani's younger sister. So they're kind of reuniting again, right? So Ananga Manjari and Radharani were uniting again. So this is one reason is described by the acharyas, that when Gopal Bhatt Goswami took that Charnamrit of Mahaprabhu's lotus feet, he was weeping and crying. Um, and at that time, Venkata Bhatt lived with his two brothers, as I mentioned, one of them, Prabodhananda Saraswati, other's name was Trimala Bhatt. So at that time, Shri Prabodhananda Saraswati was a three-dandi sannyasi of Ramanuja Sampradaya. And Venkata Bhatt and his other brother Trimala Bhatt were also Vaishnavas in the Ramanuja Sampradaya. And at the time of Mahaprabhu's visit, Gopal Bhatt was only a child, 10-year-old. You know, and when the little boy, 10-year-old Gopal Bhatt, offered his respects at the feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu picked him up, held him in his lap, and affectionately embraced the little boy. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to call the boy and give him the remnants of his prasadam by giving, his prasad to him in this manner. He was actually blessing Gopal Bhatt Goswami to become a great acharya in future. So the Lord stayed at the house of Venkata Bhatta. Every day, Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami would serve him personally. During his 4 month stay, Lord Chaitanya developed a very close friendship with Venkata Bhatt, which Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describes as a Sakhya Ras. We know different rasas one can have the relationship with the Supreme Lord. So this is described by our acharyas that their relationship was in a Sakhya Ras. So they were like freely, talking with each other. They would often laugh. They would joke together. So one day, one day in a humorous mood, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Venkata Bhatt that, at that time, Sri Chaitanya instructed Venkata Bhatt on a position of Lakshmi Devi, and the worship of Lakshmi Narayan versus the position of the gopis and the worship of Radha Govinda. So, the Lord preached these points to him in a humorous style, laughing and joking with him in a very, very, subtle and clever way. So the Lord said to Venkata Bhatt, Bhatt, your Lakshmi Devi is the crest jewel of the chaste ladies. My Krishna is a Gopa, boy who herds cows. Why does your worshipable, goddess of fortune, Sri Lakshmi Devi, abandon the happiness of Vaikuntha and her service to Lord Narayan? Why does she go to Vrindavan and perform, all these severe austerities to attain the association of my Gopal, the cowherd boy of Raja? So why does she want to be with Krishna? So Venkata Bhatt said Krishna and Narayan are one and the same, my lord. He said Krishna is one of the forms our Lord takes in order to enjoy the pastimes of a clever and a support, a little bit of sporting nature. So there is no violation of Lakshmi Devi's chastity if she takes an interest in Krishna. He is one and the same with Narayan. This is not a contradiction, with any religious principles like that. So like that he was explaining. So therefore, why are you joking with me? You know. So so Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, well, what you say is true, but you tell me this. Why is that Lakshmi Devi performs great penances to attain Krishna but cannot do so? On the other hand, the Upanishads also performed penances to attain Krishna, but they were successful. How is that Upanishads succeeded in entering Vrindavan and getting Krishna's association where Lakshmi Devi failed? So Venkata Bhatt said, I cannot understand these mysteries at all. So at this point, he said, you are Krishna himself. You know the meaning of your own pastimes. Why are you asking me? Only those who you choose to enlighten can understand these things. If you enlighten me, then I can also understand, my Lord. So Lord Chaitanya said that Lord Krishna has one unique quality. He attracts the hearts of everyone with his personal conjugal love in a Madhurya Ras. Lord Narayan has 60 transcendental qualities, but Krishna has 64. And all of them are saturated with his unique quality of Madhurya. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, he attracts the mind of Lakshmi Devi. But Lord Narayan can never attract the minds of Braja Gopis. So it's said that one time in Braja Leela, Krishna disguised as Lord Narayan, and he appeared before the gopis who were like searching for Krishna. So seeing Lord Narayan, the gopis said, "Oh Lord Narayan, please accept our obeisances. Where did Krishna go? Do you see him anywhere?" So by following the gopis who you get the mood, right? Mood of the gopis. So by following the gopis who spontaneously love Krishna without awareness of his position, of his godhead position, one can attain Krishna. So at that time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained that Lakshmi Devi wanted to remain in her position as the opulent goddess of fortune in Vaikuntha Loka, and at the same time enter into the pastimes of Krishna, um, where you know sweetness and beauty are superior to opulence and power. So that's the difference. That why this was not possible for her. So it said that only those who follow in the footsteps of the gopis and the residents of Vrindavan can attain such a position. Just give it another thought. Though only those who can follow in the footsteps of the gopis and the residents of Vrindavan can attain such a position. So the Upanishads succeeded where Lakshmi Devi failed, because they followed in the footsteps of the gopis. So before this explanation was given, Venkata Bhatt thought that Sri Narayan was the supreme personality of Godhead. You know, so thinking in this way, he believed that the worship of Narayan was the supreme form of worship, and Mahaprabhu understood his misconception and corrected it through jovial you know conversations with him. So after this, Venkata Bhatt was convinced of the supreme position of Krishna and Vrindavan, and then he took the cause of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Although he was raised in the Ramanuja Sampradaya, um, you know, so he offered his respects at the lotus feet of the Lord, and the Lord embraced him. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu As I mentioned earlier, he's ended up staying there for 4 months. And Gopal Bhatt was 10-year-old at that time. He had a chance to render a lot of personal service to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One day, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was resting while Gopal Bhatt Goswami was massaging his lotus feet and legs. And it is said that pleased with this menial service that Gopal Bhatt Goswami was doing, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu disclosed many confidential things to him. He addressed Gopal Bhatt Goswami as the confidential companion of Srimati Radharani. And at that age, 10-year-old Gopal, he, the way he would have conversation, he would say, you, my lord, are the son of Maharaj Nanda, who has assumed Srimati Radharani's color as a disguise, as a 10-year-old. Very deep conversations. Can you imagine? So, you know, um, but Gopal Bhatt Goswami at that time, at that age, he revealed his heart to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he said, I'm very, very sad because I didn't get to witness your pastimes in Navadvip, your appearance, your pastimes as a child, your pastimes as a householder, etc., etc. And Acharyas write that Gopal Bhatt Goswami's sorrow was very clearly evident. His eyes were full of tears. His actions reflected the that in his heart he was full of the ecstasy that he was feeling in the divine presence of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was silent, but he heard him. He knew what is in the heart of his devotee. So that night, in order to sort of pacify Gopal Bhatt Goswami, Mahaprabhu appeared to him in a dream. And in the dream, Gopal Bhatt Goswami saw Navadvip, like with all the tall palm trees everywhere. If you've been to Mayapur, you will see tall trees are everywhere. He saw the Ganges River. And then suddenly he saw Nimai Pandit as a Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his youth, younger age, childhood. Nimai Pandit walking gracefully on the banks of the river. Um, when he looked closely, he also saw, in the dream, this is all happening in the dream, Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita Prabhu, and there were many others who were accompanying the Lord. And they were all chanting Hare Krishna. They were chanting, they were having kirtan. So as the kirtan party approached, Mahaprabhu kept looking at Gopal Bhatt. And as the party met, the kirtan party came close to him and he met Lord Nityananda reached out to embrace Gopal Bhatt Goswami. But just then, Gopal Bhatt Goswami woke up from his dream. And in his ecstasy, he jumped out of the bed and he ran towards the quarters where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was staying. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was actually waiting for Gopal Bhatt Goswami to arrive. So when he opened the door, what did he see? Instead of seeing Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a sannyasi, he saw the Lord had assumed the form of a cowherd boy with a blue complexion, playing his flute. Um, and something similar actually has also happened to Ramananda Roy. It's mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita that one time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also appeared to him as a cowherd boy. So, and at that time, Ramananda Roy, he had said to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, um, you know, at, at first I saw you like you appear like a sannyasi, but now I'm seeing you as Shamasundar, the cowherd boy. So that it's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So there's a description of the form of that cowherd boy that Gopal Bhatt Goswami saw very nicely. So when he saw this form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gopal Bhatt Goswami, it's described very nicely that the Lord's, his eyebrows were curved like a bow, a bow and his glance was more than adequate to steal the hearts of everyone. His face was like an autumn moon. His smile, was exuberating all the like rays of sweetness. He wore a beautiful dhoti, expertly wrapped in three folds around his body. He had a beautiful malati garland hanging from his neck, and his limbs, when they moved with this grace, they were all like decorated with all these different ornaments. So like the beautiful description is given. So then from that form, as a cowherd boy, all of a sudden Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu turned into Nimai Pandit. as Gopal Bhatt Goswami had seen him in his dream, the same form, he was stunned. He was stunned by seeing this, what's happening, right in front of his eyes. And then it went from then, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the cowherd boy, then to Nimai. So had seen all these forms of the Lord. So at this point, Gopal Bhatt Goswami, he was stunned. He fell at the feet of Nimai Pandit and he started paying his obeisances. But when he got up, he found himself once again in front of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a sannyasi with a shaven head and a saffron cloth. So this way, Gopal Bhatt Goswami had a very, very personal, intimate dealings with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Sri Rangam, as the Lord spent 4 months of that rainy season at the home of Venkata Bhatt, discussing so many things about Krishna and his pastimes. So at the end of the 4 months, Lord Chaitanya was preparing to continue his tour of South India. And you can imagine what the family with whom Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stayed must be feeling. Sometimes we feel that separation when we are in association of our spiritual masters or senior Vaishnavas, and we have had good fortune of rendering service to them, and when they leave, we feel that hollowness in our hearts. So this is what the young 10-year-old Gopal Bhatt Goswami was also going through. So he came to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and he said, "My dear Mahaprabhu, I want to come with you. Take me with you. I want to serve you." He said, "Prema dhana vina vyartha daridra jivana, dasa kari vetan mora deha prema dhana." Life without love is useless and poor, as they say. Appoint me in thy service, O Lord, with love as my pay. Without prema, one is impoverished. Please take me and empower me with your love. So, he was, tears were flowing through his eyes. He could not even think of a moment without being in association of his dear Lord. But Mahaprabhu said, "No, Gopal, no, not now. You should stay here with your parents, render service to them. They are elderly, take care of them. And one day when they depart, my instruction to you is that you go to Vrindavan. There you will meet Rupa and Sanatan. They will reveal to you the mysteries of my truth and my moods. So, in this way, you will understand everything about Radha and Krishna in Braj." And Mahaprabhu left. And that was the last time that Gopal Bhatt Goswami ever saw Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, in time, Gopal Bhatt Goswami, took initiation from his uncle, the brother of Venkata Bhatt, as we said earlier. His uncle was the great Prabodhananda Saraswati. He was a disciple, so it is confirmed. He was a disciple of Prabodhananda Saraswati. It is mentioned in Hari Bhakti Vilas, that this is mentioned, so it is bona fide that he's a disciple of Prabodhananda Saraswati. Who's, yeah. So, and years later, when Gopal Bhatt Goswami's parents, died, instead of running to Jagannath Puri, where Lord Chaitanya was still performing his pastimes, and some very special pastimes in Jagannath Puri, instead of going there, he dutifully left for Vrindavan, for Braj. He had a choice of Vani or Vapu. Vapu means the personal association of great personalities, and Vani means to follow the instructions of the great personalities. So you can just imagine, Mahaprabhu is not that far away in Jagannath Puri from Sri Rangam, and he still had some years left on this planet. And we know how close the two of them were. But Gopal Bhatt Goswami chose Vani. He chose to follow the instruction. And this is very instructive example for all of us also. Both Vani and Vapu are important, but Srila Prabhupada has often told us that of the two, Vani Seva is more important, because the form of the Lord or the spiritual master, sorry, not form of the Lord, but the form of the spiritual master may disappear at some point. But their instructions remain with us throughout and eternally. So Prabhupada would sometimes repeat the saying. He would say that, "May the teachings of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur eternally dance in the courtyard of my heart." And once Srila Prabhupada also said to a group of his disciples that I did not know anything about writing, but my spiritual master told me to spread the Lord Krishna's glories to the Western world in the English language. So this is what I am trying to do. So following in the steps of my Guru Maharaj. So he was, he was showing by example. He's like that. He said that I have no qualifications at all. I'm just trying to follow the instruction of my spiritual master, and his instructions are just empowering me. So just imagine, just the instructions, the bani of great acharyas can empower us if we take them to our heart. So in our life, following instructions of Srila Prabhupada, is forever, the utmost thing. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Sanatan Goswami and Rupa Goswami that one day, a wonderful boy, he called Gopal Bhatt Goswami, a wonderful boy will come to Vrindavan. Please take care of him as you would take care of your younger brother. So that was the instruction that was given. And when Gopal Bhatt Goswami went straight to Braj after his parents left, he took shelter of Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis. And as soon as he arrived, um, to Braj, Rupa and Sanatan Goswami wrote to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was in Jagannath Puri at that time, that Gopal had arrived, um, because they had received that instruction, so taking care of them. And when that letter, at that time, hand delivered, the letters were hand delivered. When that letter, um, you know, took took some time to get to Jagannath Puri, but when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu got that letter, he was very overjoyed. They were taking prasadam when the letter arrived. It said that they were taking prasadam at the house of Gadadhar Pandit, and upon receiving that letter, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so ecstatic to learn that Gopal Bhatt Goswami had finally arrived in Vrindavan, because Lord had seen the future, what Gopal Bhatt Goswami was going to do, right? And it is said that he immediately left his meal, composed a letter for Srila Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, and sent it to Vrindavan, along with the set of his own kopins, outer cloth, and a small slab of wood, which the Lord would sit on as a gift for Gopal Bhatt Goswami. Now, the acharyas say that Lord Chaitanya sent his kopins because when the kopin of a self-realized soul or a personality is accepted as a prasad, the attack of Kamadev and the lust diminishes in the heart of that devotee. So, and then in our shastras, there is also a pastime where Lord Chaitanya rips apart the kopins of Lord Nityananda Prabhu and tells devotees to accept the threads as prasad. And he tells them to tie the thread on their heads, and that when you do so, all the lust will disappear from the heart. So take those threads and tie them on your head. So we can take the instructions of our great acharyas as the threads of those kopins and tie them on our head and carry them in our lives. And if doing so, the lust in our hearts will also disappear. So now also in that letter, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's letter to Rupa and Sanatan Goswami, he instructed that Gopal Bhatt Goswami should start giving diksha. He should start initiating. And that's interesting because Rupa and Sanatan Goswami were very humble. They were not accepting disciples. Rupa Goswami eventually accepted one disciple, Srila Jiva Goswami, and Lokanath Goswami was also present. He was the first Goswami to come to Vrindavan. He had taken not a vow not to initiate anyone, but later, due to the humility of Srila Narottam Das Thakur, he accepted him as a disciple. But here in this letter, Mahaprabhu instructed that at some point, Gopal Bhatt Goswami should start initiating. And it's described that everyone in Vrindavan was attracted to him. It's also mentioned that he was like the regal in his appearance, like a king amongst Brahmins. He had a smile that was full of compassion. So the other Goswamis of Braj were like his, life air, and Radharaman deity was like is very much his soul. Um, anyway, so despite his, this exalted, status or stature, whatever you call it, he always remained with an, a very, very humble and meek attitude, and After Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu departed this world, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami approached Gopal Bhatt Goswami for permission to write Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Gopal Bhatt Goswami granted that that permission, as I mentioned earlier, but he explicitly told him, "Do not mention my name," and in extreme humility. Um, so while Gopal Bhatt Goswami lived in Vrindavan for many years, he lived in an underground chamber. It's described the underground chamber was next to the deity of Shanketa Devi. Shanket is where Radha and Krishna first met, where he remained deeply absorbed, remembering the pastimes of Radha and Krishna in that place. And one day, again, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared to him in his dream. And he said, Gopal Bhatt Goswami, go to Kali Gandaki river and find Sri Hari. The Kali Gandaki river, many of you might know, it's a sacred river that flows in modern day Nepal. It's high up in Himalayas. And there is one holy spot there called Muktinath. So it's like a small little mountain. You have to climb up to go to the top. And in that little basin below that mountain, Muktinath, this is where the sacred Kaligandaki river flows. And this is where the Shaligram Shilas that many of you have seen or other devotees worship, senior devotees worship or have Shaligram Shilas, they come from there. So he said, go to Kaligandaki river, Kaligandaki, and find Sri Hari, which means find the Lord in his self-manifested form as a Shaligram Shila. Now remember, my dear devotees, this is 500 years ago. There are no planes, there are no trains to take to get to Nepal, which is quite a ways from Vrindavan. So that's a pretty austere, arduous journey to get to Kaligandaki. But Gopal Bhatt Goswami, on the instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his dream, he went, he walked, he walked there, and he brought back uh, just to make a long story short, he brought back 12 Shaligram Shilas. Actually, it was like he was putting this holder in the river, and every time he picked up, there were Shilas coming, and he would put them back. But in the third time, there were 12, so he took it as a you know um, Lord's uh, desire that he has these 12 Shaligram Shilas. So he brought back 12 Shaligram Shilas, and on the way back, he was passing through a village called Debananda, and there he met a Brahmin by the name Madhav Prasad Sharma. And this Madhav Prasad Sharma, he had two illustrious sons, Gopinath Sharma and Damodar Sharma. So, and at that time, Gopal Bhatt Goswami initiated them, the family. They came a short time later to assist him in the worship of his Shaligram Shilas in Vrindavan. Now, of course, Gopal Bhatt Goswami worshipped those Shilas very nicely, but he was always thinking that he would like to worship the Lord in the form where he could dress him and find clothes and ornaments. Because Shaligram Shila is a Shaligram Shila. You wake him up, you worship very nicely, and you put him to sleep. That is the worship of Shaligram Shila. Prabhupada said one time, you wake him up, you worship him, you put him to sleep. It sounds very simple, but it's a very high standard of worship. Prabhupada writes in the purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita that he was just waiting till some of his disciples reached the Brahminical platform, and then he would introduce them to the worship of Shaligram Shila. Prabhupada wrote that. But that's a Chaitanya Charitamrita purport. So it's a very elevated worship. So Gopal Bhatt Goswami, he was thinking, like, the other Goswamis, they have their deities, you know, they're dressing them in fine clothes and ornaments and crowns and jewels, and I don't have any of that, but I want to worship my Lord in his form. Yeah? So in his heart, he was thinking like that. So one day, it so happened that a very rich merchant, he came, and he gave Gopal Bhatt Goswami a number of beautiful items to worship a deity, like clothes and ornaments and crowns and feathers. And it is described that Gopal Bhatt Goswami was worried that all these beautiful objects would be wasted because there was no way he could use them unless he had a deity in a Vigraha form. So one night, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared to him in his dream once again. And in the dream in Vrindavan, he was there, like he was in Vrindavan when he appeared in the dream. He said, "My dear Gopal Bhatt Goswami, I'm very, very pleased with your worship. I'm also very pleased that you initiated Gopinath and Damodar Sharma to assist you. I know your heart is anxious because the Shaligram doesn't have a form, but I assure you very soon that Krishna will manifest from a Shila depending on your intensity and hankering." It's a very, very important point, my dear devotees. It's a clue for us. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said this to his very, very dear devotee, that it is our intensity and hankering to get Krishna that our progress is dependent on. So, if we want to see Krishna one day, that should be our heartbeat, and that should be our mood. It will depend on our intensity and hankering to see the Lord. And for that, we have to give up all the nonsense attractions in this world that we have that are in our heart. So, there's that saying, all that glitters is not gold. There is no gold anywhere to be found uh, in this material world that we can carry with us forward. It's just rusted iron. Or so anyway, so Krishna will, he said Krishna will manifest from the Shila depending on your intensity and hankerings. And it's also actually called in Sanskrit, there's a term called lolyam. It's also the greediness in a good way, right? To obtain Krishna. So when Gopal Bhatta Goswami awoke that next morning, he was like in total ecstasy. He knew that very soon one of his Shaligram Shilas was going to manifest in this threefold bending form, which he could dress with beautiful clothes, could give him a flute and a turban and a peacock feather. So it's described that in anticipation for the arrival of the Lord, every day he would put all his 12 Shaligram Shilas in a straw basket and he would swing them from a tree like we do Jhulan Yatra for Radha and Krishna to get ready. He was swinging the Shaligrams in the tree like this, and he was singing bhajans to them. And while he was doing this, he would think in his mind that when my deity comes, he will have the face of Govindaji, the chest of Gopinath, and the feet of Madan Mohan. So he had so much meditation going on in his mind as to how the form of the Lord would look like, because those three are, the prominent deities of Vrindavan. So he was thinking like that. So often when doing puja to his shilas in the morning, he would bathe them. He would say, "Today I have bathed you with my tears. Why aren't you taking the form that Mahaprabhu has promised? I know you are there." So like that, it was going on for a while. So at this point, there are two authorized versions of what happened next. you know and the version we're going to talk about is very, very sweet. So this so happened that one day after finishing his bathing the shaligrams in the morning, it was a day of Narsimha Chaturdasi, the appearance day of Lord Nrsingadev. So everyone in Braj was talking about the pastime of Lord Nrsingadev, that he came out of a stone pillar, and all day long, he was hearing this pastime everywhere, and he was crying, "If only I was Prahlad, Lord, you manifested from the stone pillar for Prahlad. If I was Prahlad, you would manifest from my Shaligram Shilas." So that evening, he gave his Shaligrams an ultimatum. He said to them, "I'm going to Yamuna to take bath, and when I come back, and if I don't see a manifestation of your form, I will tie all of you up around my neck, and I will go jump in the Yamuna River, and I will give up my life." So he gave that ultimatum, that I'm going to take a bath now, and if I come back and one of you has not really manifested in that form that Mahaprabhu has promised me, I'm going to take all of you, wrap you around my neck, and I'm going to jump in the river, and I'm going to give up my life. So he said, "What is the use of worshiping you if you do not reciprocate with me?" And it is said that when he was scolding the Shaligram Shilas, or he was communicating in this way, they were trembling. Now, of course, only the pure devotees can chastise and have that kind of a sambandha with Krishna. We should not try to imitate, such mood in our worship of our deities. So, um, you know, but anyway, so he went, he took his bath, and when he came back, he could not believe his eyes. His principal Damodar Shila had manifested into the sweet threefold bending form of Shri Shri Radha Ramanji, Radha Raman Lal ki jai. One of the favorite deities of all the devotees. Most of you have either seen Radharamanji in person or in his photos. It is one of the most beautiful, magnanimous, amazing deities. One could easily say that Radha Ramanji is like the heartbeat of Vrindavan. His followers, they say that whoever takes the darshan of Radha Raman gets the benefit of seeing Govindaji, Gopinath, and Madan Mohan. Right? That was the meditation of the mood of Gopal Bhatt Goswami. Right? So as per the desire that was, that he had before the deity would, that the deity would incorporate the features of those other three deities. Right? So interestingly, Radharamanji manifested from a Shaligram Shila. There is no Radharani, but yet he's called Radha Raman. Raman means, to give, someone who gives pleasure, to give pleasure. So Radha Raman means he who gives pleasure to Srimati Radharani. So why is he called Radha Raman? There is no Radharani there, with the deity. So, well, Rupa Goswami has commented about this, and he said that Radharaman appeared. He appeared near Nidhivan, one of my favorite places in Braj, the place of Rasalila. That's the place where Krishna gives the greatest pleasure to Radharani. That's how he got the name Radharaman. And then, of course, next to Radharaman on the altar at Radharaman temple, there is this beautiful throne just off to his left. There's this little throne there, and on that throne is a feather, and on that feather is written Radharani's name in Sanskrit, Sri Radha. Um, it's always covered by a cloth, so we can't see it. So Radha is there because she is non-different than her name. It said Radha, no, Ra Shabdam Kurvatas Trasto Dadami Bhaktim Uttamam Dha Shabdam Kurvatah Paschad Yami Sarvana Lobataha. Krishna speaks in Brahma Vaivarta Puran. He says that on hearing the syllable Ra, I become anxious and bestow the most pristine bhakti upon who chants, on the, whoever is the chanting. Um, and on hearing the syllable Dha, I personally follow the chanter in order to hear the chanting of the name Radha. So Radha is not different than her name. Her name is written in Sanskrit on that feather, which is covered by a cloth, sometime by a crown also, just next to her beloved Radharaman Lalji. So now, after Radharaman appeared, many incredible loving exchanges took place between Gopala Bhatt Goswami and Radharamanji. Once the deity called Gopal Bhatt Goswami and revealed himself as Gopal, tending to cows, surrounded by cowherd boys. This happened in Vrindavan. And another occasion, Gopal Bhatt Goswami was feeling great separation from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Shri Radha Ramanji manifested himself as Lord Chaitanya in the freshness of his youth, dressed as a Brahmin. Um, and for a moment, Gopal Bhatt Goswami just stood and stared at this enchanting form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that Radharaman had manifested. And then he overcame with bliss. He called out, "What have I seen? What have I seen? What have I seen?" And he fell to the ground unconscious. And Bhakti Ratnakar makes a very profound statement about the relationship that Gopal Bhatt Goswami had with his very dear most Shri Shri Radharamanji. It says that Radharaman, Shri Shri Radharaman wants to satisfy whatever desire is found in the heart of Gopal Bhatt Goswami. Such was the bond between the Lord and his devotee. And of course, Gopal Bhatt Goswami would worship Shri Shri Radharamanji with unparalleled love and devotion. And a very very close friend of Gopala Bhatta Goswami was Bugharva Goswami, whose samadhi is also there in Radha Damodar temple. And he was a very very dear and close friend of his. And Bugharva Goswami would sometimes watch and observe the puja Gopala Bhatta Goswami was rendering to Shri Shri Radharamanji. And it said that with it was like with great satisfaction he would sit there and he would just observe. So it was after the appearance of Radha Ramanji that Gopal Bhatt Goswami started to accept disciples, as previously ordered by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. um, at that time, Raghunath Bhatt Goswami also was starting to initiate disciples. Gopal Bhatt Goswami was empowered to initiate those who came from the western side of India, whereas Raghunath Bhatt Goswami would initiate all the devotees who came from the areas of Bengal. And it's written that the Gopal Bhatt Goswami was, he was loving, but he was also very, very strict with his disciples. One there is an instance that comes to mind, that there was once a disciple of his who was advocating that it is not required to fast on Ekadasi. So he would go around and he would say that to other around the Braj Mandal. It's not required. Gopal Bhatt Goswami warned him that this is not correct. This is not proper. But he continued to do it. So at that point, Gopal Bhatt Goswami, rejected this disciple, not following in the footsteps of our shastras and acharyas. So, but anyway, Gopal Bhatt Goswami's most famous and prominent disciple was Srinivas Acharya, who was also directed by Srila Jiva Goswami to take Diksha from Gopal Bhatt Goswami, even though Srinivas Acharya was from the eastern side, he was from Bengal. So anyway, Gopal Bhatt Goswami had planned to put Srinivas Acharya in charge of Radharaman's worship, but when he saw the the greater importance of his disciples, uh, you know, to go out and preach and spread the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he asked him and instructed him to return back to Bengal, um, instead of giving him that service of worshiping Shri Shri Radharamanji. Um, he was one of the three transcendental persons, Srinivas Acharya, Narottam Das Thakur, Shyamananda Pandit. They were there. We could say they were the original, maybe the second generation, as if you will, you can call them, who continued to preach after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left this world. Um, and among those three, Srinivas Acharya, a little elder, he was kind of like the organizer for everything. He would organize all the different festivals and events and all those things nicely. There were greater details about this. I don't recall them now. Um, one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, Sitala Mataji, has written a wonderful book on the life of Srila Narottam Das Thakur, and in that book, it is described very, very nicely the pastimes of Srinivas Acharya. So anyway, when Gopal Bhatt Goswami saw that he was a preacher, he said, "No, you go back to Bengal and you preach." And Gopal Bhatt Goswami initiated a very, very high standard of deity worship of Sri Radharaman. One time, Srila Prabhupada told his disciples that to understand deity worship, they should observe the worship of Radharamanji in his temple in Vrindavan. And Srila Prabhupada was very well aware of that standard, because while he was staying at the Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan for a number of years, preparing to go to the West, every morning he would visit 7 temples of Vrindavan, and in the evening he would go back to the 7 temples for darshan. And that's the tradition. So each morning he would first take darshan of Radha Damodar, and then after performing Madhukari, it's hard for us to even think and imagine Srila Prabhupada performing Madhukari, begging door to door. It's the 3 stops, 3 houses. You beg for some prasad, and that's your sustenance for the day, whether you get it, you don't get it, or whatever it is. So after performing Madhukari, Srila Prabhupada would go for darshan at Radha Raman temple, and he would chant japa at the samadhi of Gopala Bhatta Goswami, which is right next to Radha Raman temple. So in 1586, almost 100 years after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance, Gopal Bhatta Goswami passed away at the age of 85. And that's where his sacred samadhi is, on the property, you could say, of Radharaman temple, very close to where Radharamanji appeared from the Damodar Shila. And very kindly, he left us his Vani. He had Vani from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he passed on that Vani in his instructions to us in the form of the books he wrote for all of us, on which Srila Prabhupada has expanded upon, commented on for all of us to read. And there are famous books that Gopal Bhatta Goswami left us, like Hari Bhakti Vilas, which he collaborated on with Srila Sanatana Goswami, Satkriya Deepika, Samskar Deepika, very, very important books. So we can say that he lives forever by his divine instructions, and the followers live with him by immersing themselves in those books on on the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So today, you know, um, this is something that I heard from Srila Indradumna Maharaj's lecture. Most of the content that I'm sharing with you today. There is a wonderful devotee by the name of Madhavananda Prabhu in Jagannath Puri, who is was a wonderful disciple of Srila Gaura Govinda Maharaj, and he sent some beautiful prayers to Indradumna Maharaj about Gopala Bhatta Goswami, and they are there by Srila Yadunanda Das Thakur from his Karnananda chapter 5. These prayers are wonderful. It really gives us the mood that we can imbibe and get inspiration from, um, to understand the glories of Srila Gopala Bhatta Goswami. So I'll just read them, and I think after hearing these, we will appreciate much more, because we have heard the glories of this great Vaishnava Acharya in our Sampradaya, and his beloved deity of Shri Shri Radha Ramanji. So it goes like this. May Srila Gopala Bhatt Goswami, who has the power to incessantly glorify devotional service of Lord Hari, and who is detached from the perishable material objects as a result of his uninterrupted spiritual realization, be manifest in my heart. His home has become glorious with the fortune of being the destination of the Supreme Lord Mahaprabhu. May Srila Gopala Bhatta Goswami, who was celebrated by the name Gunamanjari in the land of Braj, be manifest in my heart. Lord Sri Chaitanya, who appears out of compassion for the people of Kali Yuga, has impelled him to expand the exquisite bliss of transcendental conjugal mellows. May Srila Gopala Bhatta Goswami be manifest in my heart, relishing the taste of his particular loving mood in Braj. He has become mad. In that condition, he is restless and he dances, laughs, and sings madly. Given the order to deliver the conditioned souls beaten by the age of Kali, he makes himself visible to the eyes. If Gopal Bhatt Goswami and Raghunath Das Goswami come forward to help and nourish the excellent divine love for Sri Radha's beloved, what possibility, what possibly is there that one will not achieve with ease? One who understands these words and their meanings, which are imbued with the loving moods and affections of pure devotees, and which depict the various mellows of transcendental exchange and pure divine love, that very person, by this reciting this supreme jewel like glorification, which destroys all ignorance, will soon himself become a manjari, a young cowherd girl who assists the gopis, and in that form enter into a groove of such young maid servants of Radharani. I offer my obeisances unto Srila Gopala Bhatta Goswami, whose heart is overwhelmed with transcendental love for Srila Sanatan Goswami, who is distinguished in every respect on the account of Sri Rupa Goswami's friendship, whose life and soul is Sri Sri Radha Raman and fulfills the aspirations of his servitors. Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami ki jai, Sri Sri Radha Raman ji ki jai, Srila Rupa Sanatan Goswami ki jai, Srila Six Goswamis of Vrindavan ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo.
Thank you, Ramvijay Prabhuji, for speaking about many of the secrets and pastimes we've may have not heard of from Gopal Bhatta Goswami before. We are going to reserve the next 15 minutes or so for any questions or realizations devotees may have. We request that you raise your hands in the participant menu if you have said question or realization. All right, it appears Prabhuji's class was very complete in itself. So, if any devotees have Any questions or?
Vijay Krishna, I was trying to share something, but it seems like because I'm the host, I actually don't have the raise hand feature.
Oh,
So
okay.
sorry about that. Ramaji Prabhu, this is such a wonderful class. Thank you for sharing. Firstly, I can see how much love you have for Radha Raman, because when you were talking about the deity, there was as much joy of you describing the deity as there was as you were talking about Gopal Bhatta Goswami. I actually wanted to just share something I was hearing in a class by Radhanath Maharaj the other day on another thing we can be very grateful to Gopal Bhatta Goswami for was what you started off the class with, his connection with Sri Rangam. So in the 80s, so Sri Rangam, being a very orthodox temple, did not allow people who were of Western origin to enter the temple, like as many temples in India still do. In the 80s, one of the descendants of Venkata Bhatta, who essentially is a descendant of Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Murli Bhatt Iyer, went into, he was a part of the board in Sri Rangam, and he actually went to those people in Sri Rangam and shared that, we talk about Ranganath, we talk about glories of Ranganath, and we talk about Mahaprabhu in Sri Rangam and respect him, but yet we are preventing his followers from coming to the temple. So it was only in the 80s that because of a descendant of Gopal Bhatta Goswami, that Sri Rangam temple updated their policy to allow ISKCON devotees and devotees from the Gaudiya Sampradaya, irrespective of their skin color or their origin of ethnicity, to come to the temple and take darshan there. So His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj was in that class. It was a 2005 class from Sri Rangam. He was appreciating the contributions of Murli Bhatt Iyer and subsequently the contribution of Gopal Bhatta Goswami and Venkata Bhatta. And I was reflecting today on the class on that connection, because Gopal Bhatta Goswami, through his potency, not only gave us Radharaman, but he also exposed Ranganath to all of us. So it's like two sets of deities because of Gopal Bhatta Goswami and his family we get access to. So I just thought it was, it's wonderful. My father, who is, so Ramaji, we just spoke earlier today about how children and parents have a unique relationship. My father, who is watching this class, is WhatsApping me right now and telling me that it is not Murli Bhatt Iyer, but it's just Murli Bhatt. So I have to make sure I correct myself here so he doesn't continue to message me. But I just wanted to share that. So thank you for linking that in a very beautiful way.
Thank you for sharing that. I did not know that up until 80s we could not have other devotees from other sampradayas come in.
If there are any other questions, we also request devotees to raise their hands. If not, I wanted to actually just thank Prabhuji for talking about how Gopal Bhatta Goswami used to live underground, I believe you said, for a period of time, and used to write books and do seva there. And often, we growing up here in the U.S. Um, live in such, I guess, relatively in a very comfortable setting to do our bhakti in, but just to imagine that, living underground every day and serving the Shilas in that manner, just hearing about that, something I didn't hear before, really just clicked in my head about Gopal Bhatta Goswami. If there are no more further realizations or questions, we'll move on to our announcements. Um, if I can share my screen. Yep. All right. All right. So today is the 31st. Thank you for participating in our Sunday feast today. Once again, thank you, His Grace Ramajay Prabhuji, for giving the class today. Some upcoming events that we have on the 1st of February is Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami's Appearance Day. And on the 2nd is Sri Jayadev Goswami's Disappearance Day. Both very auspicious days to keep in mind of. On the 3rd is Sri Lokanath Das Thakur's Disappearance Day. And on the 7th, which will be on our Sunday feast, will be Satla Ekadashi. So remember to fast from grains and beans during that day. Also, happy birthday to Krishav. Sorry, and believe it was his birthday recently, or it might be coming up. I'm not very sure about that, but Also, congratulations to Ryan, one of our Sunday school children who was one of the winners